Mr. Barr, if you need me to, I do have the list here. I could do a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That would be great.
Okay. Um, Chair Bryson,
Present.
Greg Smith,
Here.
Miss Hugh Scandies,
Here.
Miss Treem. I do not see her. Mr. Dordea.
Here.
Mr. Coleman,
Present.
Miss Shivens,
Here.
Miss Collins,
Here.
Miss Niven,
Here.
Mr. Kozlerich. I don't see him with us today. Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to just dive right into this because I know everybody's here for public testimony. Mr. Barr, do you want to go over the matrix progress update before we begin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to do that. So in your packet, you have a couple of documents. One is the usual one that you've seen from me, the first couple pages of the packet pages 2 through 4. No major changes to this one. This is here just to remind you of the actions that you've taken to date as it relates mostly to regulatory options. The final page of the packet, I think, is the relevant one to focus on today. That is packet page 5. If you were to conclude your work today, which I'm not saying that you are, but just to put framing on this, the report that I would draft for your review would include 2 recommended regulatory options, which is represented on the top right of that page under recommended changes, and that those 2 regulatory options that you have brought forth to date are that a potential fee for permits that may be considered, and then the second one is a potential cap on the number of short-term rentals permittable per person or entity. All the other regulatory options that you've considered, you have ruled out. And then the metric that you discussed at the last meeting that you may recommend future assemblies consider one or both of those regulatory options would be tied to rental vacancy rate. There is a graph on packet page 5 that shows rental vacancy rate in Juneau over the past 14 years. You have not made any decisions about at what level or at what rate you might recommend implementing one of those 2 regulatory options. That is a discussion that you could have now or in the future before the conclusion of the task force. Another option would be to simply recommend that to future assemblies in your eventual report, that be the metric that they consider at their discretion, right, without a recommendation from the task force. That's an option available to you too. I will also note, this is a bit of a sidebar, but is worth noting that in the other kind of key piece that
Barr?
yes.
I'm sorry, can we take a 1 minute at ease to make sure that...
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just conclude by saying that as we exist today, right, the work that you've done today, the other key piece of information that I would include in a draft report for you, were I to write one today, would be the work that you've done around requiring marketplace facilitators to collect and remit sales taxes on behalf of owners and operators of short-term rentals, and the related sort of legislation that has already worked its way through the assembly process. So that has concluded, but I think that is an important thing to note as work being done by this task force. So that's what I have for you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take questions on any of that. And then, of course, we have public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Questions for Mr. Barr from the committee? No hands online, Mr. Barr? We'd see them. All right, I'll close it for questions. Mr. Barr, my understanding is that those recommended changes, you were wanting us to decide that here, or were you thinking that was the assembly decision for those recommended changes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think the task force has those are the recommended regulatory options that the task force has previously voted on. So I think a recommendation for me would be that you hear public testimony this afternoon and this evening, and then at a future meeting, I think my recommendation to you would be either option. The first choice would be to determine if the task force wishes to land on a rental vacancy rate number or a range of numbers, that you might recommend future assemblies consider one or both of those regulatory options that are under recommended changes. And then I could incorporate that into a draft report for you. Or another option would be to just direct me to draft a report with the information that we currently have. And I would recommend choosing one of those options or a third path after we hear public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. I think Mr. Barr, in his third option, was kind of what I was thinking. We would hear public testimony, and then we'll have an additional meeting in 2 Thursdays. Correct, Mr. Barr? That we would have, it would be the final STR meeting, and we could take those 2 topics up at that time. Are there any further questions or comments before we jump into public testimony from the committee? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go into public testimony. Do we have a list, Mr. Barr?
If I might, Mr. Chair, we did not have anyone sign up to testify via Zoom for this particular meeting. We have had individuals, at least one, sign up to testify via Zoom at tonight's meeting. And then Mr. Barr has the in-person testimony sheet there for you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We appreciate that. And just if somebody is listening right now online, we will have a similar meeting to this from 5:30 to 6:30 this evening. So if you're not able to get public testimony in now, you will have an opportunity this evening. I'm going to announce who's up, and then I'm going to announce who's on deck. So if you're on deck, if you want to maybe make your way over there, so that way we just reduce the transition time. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes. And I'm going to begin with Michelle Norman, followed by Tom Williams. Say your name when you get up and just the part of town you live in. You don't have to give your address. And you'll have 2 minutes, and you can begin as soon as you touch the button and make the green light come on. Ms. Norman, thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Norman. I live out the road. I'm the owner of 5 long-term rentals and 5 short-term rentals. And I've been listening to most, if not all, of the short-term rental task force meetings, and been a little bit frustrated that there hasn't been an opportunity for public comment. I've been a little bit surprised that there hasn't been more input from members of the task force that have disclosed that they are owner and operators. When I've heard certain things that I want to raise my hand and get some information, and am surprised that they don't do that same thing, such as when a city representative was here and said, on that last ordinance that was passed, we don't even know what data we can ask for from the platforms. Well, as an operator, I know what data is available as a city person, you should know what data you want and at least can ask for. And it just kind of boggled my mind that people here that have information weren't sharing that information at the meetings where that information would be valuable. I was surprised this task force was even put together initially, so soon after the registration requirement was put in place, and I questioned, what kind of data came out of that registration requirement? And my suspicions that none were confirmed when throughout these meetings, the data that's provided isn't from the registration requirement, but from the vendor that the city is paying to scrape data off of the system rather than having actual real data that they collect themselves. It was shared at the last meeting, I think, or maybe the one before, that it's estimated that from that data company that over $12 million in short-term rentals were generated last year. I would have loved to raise my hand and say how much sales and bed tax revenue was received last year, so we know how much is not being reported. On the April 3rd meeting, a member of this committee repeatedly said, most operators are compliant. I think most operators are compliant. So I went on my phone and I pulled up 2 pages of Airbnbs, and out of the 36 listing, 10 were not compliant and were not pulling sales tax. April 17th, I pulled all 348 listings, found that 106 are not charging sales tax. I sent that to the city, and today those 106 are still not charging sales tax. If the $25 penalty were assessed, dating back to April 17th when I reported to the city, that's over $110,000 in a penalty that the city could collect. The city responded to my April 3rd message, but not my April 7th, saying it's a lot more difficult than I understand.
Ms. Norman, we've exceeded the 2-minute. You can have 1 sentence to wrap up your comments here.
I just think that this committee and the city as a whole has really dropped their fiduciary responsibility to collect the probably in excess of $500,000 in sales tax revenue by not enforcing it because it's too hard.
Thank you, Ms. Norman. Questions from the committee? Ms. Norman, for 1 moment. Ms. Euskendis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for testifying. If you could share in written form, I would, or we could follow up offline, but I'd love to hear the details a little more about what you sent to the city and what you got back, just so we could further poke at that.
Certainly, I'd be happy to send the April 30th and the April 17th. I sent it to Mr. Barr. The first one I sent to Mr. Bryson as well, and the second one I sent to the finance manager, I think. But I'm happy to forward and put it all in writing. I just didn't have time before this, but I'd be happy to share that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Ms. Shivens.
So just briefly, the fact that now Airbnb and VRBO and other online organizations like that will now automatically collect and remit taxes, that solves that problem for you.
It does, but there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of reservations already on the books that didn't charge taxes. And so I'm very curious, when the city collects the reports, if it goes back to January 1st, you're going to see a lot of reservations that never charge taxes, and whether Airbnb is going to pony that up or what they're going to do, but you're going to be underreported a lot if they do in fact disclose all of the transactions for this year. And there's a lot of reservations through the end of the year that didn't originally charge sales tax, and either I don't think they're going to go back to those people and charge sales tax after the fact. So I'm very curious what the findings are when they do finally report.
Mr. Coleman.
I'm curious, as an operator, both the long-term and short-term rentals, have you had a chance to look at the matrix that has been proposed? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's very complex. I think one area that this group hasn't talked about is how, if you do some sort of a cap with a different matrix, when are you going to reevaluate and say, oh, we're in B now, and now we're in C, and the cap is now 300 versus 350 or 250, and then are you going to kick 50 off? Is it going to, I think it's incredibly complex. I think there's been reporting here and at the prior review of short terms that has simply said short-term rentals have minimal impact on long-term housing, and that's just ignored because everybody wants to look like they're doing something. And about the long-term housing challenges in our community, I think trying to have a fluctuating number on what's an appropriate number of short-term rentals is way too complicated. And if the city can't make sure if people are paying tax, they're not going to be able to kick people off and put them back on. And I think it's not realistic at all.
Any additional questions from the committee? Ms. Norman, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Williams, and followed by Caitlin Danhard. Mr. Barr, she did raise an interesting concept. What would happen to transactions that were collected prior to the ordinance taking effect that didn't collect sales tax? And then what would happen to those transactions once the sales tax was required for transactions that have already been paid for? What would be the expectation from the city, sir?
Mr. Chair, are you wanting me to answer questions in response to public comment at this meeting? I can.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barr. I meant to get that question answered for a future meeting, how we would deal with, maybe you could just give us a rundown how sales tax would start to be collected in a situation like this, maybe for the next meeting. More appropriate. Thank you for that. Mr. Williams, thank you for coming today. If you'd introduce yourself, say what part of town you're from, and you have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Tom Williams. I live on Fritz Cove Road, and there is some fallacies to what I just heard, and I would be glad to address that in the questions. I'm not prepared to answer that in my testimony. I've been a resident for Juneau for 48 years next month. Since 2007, my wife and I have operated a vacation rental out of our home as well as provided long-term rentals. Our short-term and long-term rentals have helped us afford our home. During that time, we have paid in excess of $44,600 in sales and room taxes and hosted more than 306 guests to date. Those guests have contributed to the Juneau economy and buying goods and services. We obtained a business license, registered with the CDJ Sales Tax Office, and always paid our sales and room taxes on time. During those 18 years of operations, we have never experienced a single complaint by a neighbor or the city. All of our guests have been respectful of our property and our neighbors, enjoying a quiet environment we provide. Short-term rentals are a very important economic driver for Juneau. That is why some communities are actually taking steps to promote STRs rather than regulate and charge them more fees. There are some people in Juneau, including CDJ government, that seem to either have a disdain of individual property rights or simply believe it is government's role to regulate any and all activities, whether a problem exists or not. Emphasis on problem. Like me, most people do not object to regulation as long as that regulation either solves a specific significant problem or seeks to avoid a significant pending problem. Unfortunately, the enabling charge given to the task force did not identify either a specific significant problem or a significant pending problem. The charge seems to have been predicated that there is likely some need for regulation. Prior to creating the task force, the Assembly adopted an ordinance required STR operators to obtain a registration number from the Sales Tax Office and to help ensure that they would collect all the taxes. Recently, the Assembly adopted other ordinance to require STR booking platforms to remit sales and room tax directly. No STR operator has objected to this approach since it should have been initiated by the Sales Tax Office years ago. The Assembly's action has preemptively implemented some of the previous considerations of the task force, which is good. There have been some assertions that STRs somehow adversely impact the availability of year-round affordable housing. There has been no conclusive evidence to that case. To the contrary, the 2004 Juneau Housing Assessment preliminary data concluded that STRs have only diverted a maximum of 1.4% of the year-round housing market. This does not qualify as a significant problem to be solved by regulation.
Mr. Williams, that's your time. You may finish your testimony in one sentence, and we'll go to questions.
Since the annual registration fee neither addresses compliance nor has positive effect, I urge the task force to abandon that option as well as the cap on the number of STRs an individual can operate under. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Are there questions for Mr. Williams from the committee? Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for being here and for your testimony. You said you do long-term rentals as well. How many short-term rentals do you operate?
We have a mother-in-law apartment associated with the house or part of the house, and we also have what we call the ocean view room below the garage. So we do two.
Thank you.
Additional questions from the committee? Mr. Coleman.
Do you ever rent out your primary home in addition to that? Those
Pardon?
other two, do you ever rent out your primary home in addition to those other two?
We do not, because we're there all the time. We live there year-round.
Additional questions? Seeing none, Mr. Williams, thank you for your testimony today. Next up, we have Caitlin Danhard, followed by, looks like John George. Ms. Danhart, if you would just introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin when ready.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Danhart, and I live in Douglas, and I have a short-term rental there. My husband Evan and I spent over 1,000 nights in short-term rentals all throughout this country and abroad while Evan was active duty military. None of this was vacation. Each temporary duty assignment's purpose was to serve the community wherever we were, and we had no choice where we were going. In Evan's final years in the U.S. Air Force, he was given permission to take off-duty employment jobs. I calculated that we made over 20 trips, totaling over 170 nights of Evan taking 24/7 general surgery call here at Bartlett Hospital. After our first trip utilizing hotel accommodations, we decided it was not worth it to us to return if we would no longer have to continue making dinners on carpet that was older than we were, with cooking equipment that probably wasn't even allowed in a hotel. It was because of short-term rentals in Juneau that we came back time and time again and now live here today. In the time we have hosted guests in our own short-term rental, we've had over 400 nights with booked guests. 95% of those stays have been working professionals, with only 22 nights bookings with tourists. If professionals who are essential to our community are forced to live in hotels, they may stop coming altogether. Our next guest are medical professionals, and the one booked after that are Christian missionaries we are donating our home to. Previously, we hosted repeat guest professionals working for our state legislature, as well as a Coast Guard family of 4 who needed temporary housing between arriving and finding their own home. I believe we owe it to all of these families who sacrifice so much. The least we can do is offer options that meet their unique needs so they can continue to serve the people of Juneau. The worst part about short-term rental regulations is that they will not solve the housing crisis that we have now. The vast majority of homes used as short-term rentals are not the type of housing needed to solve the housing crisis, but it does answer so many other problems we would otherwise have. Short-term rentals are a solution for traveling professionals, military families, and others who enhance our local community. Like it or not, many in our shoes prefer the flexibility to utilize our homes for visiting friends and family, and for that reason alone, we would never convert our rental into a long-term rental.
Ms. Danhart, thank you very much. That is our 2-minute time period. Are there questions from the committee for Ms. Danhart? Ms. Shivens?
I missed it. And so you had over 1,000 nights and just 22 were tourists?
No, our personal experience is 1,000 nights, so we understand how beneficial short-term rentals are. We had over 400 nights of guests who stayed in our home since we purchased it a couple years ago. And of those over 400 nights, only 22 nights have been tourist.
Ms. Euskandis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here and for your testimony. One of the potential changes that the committee has discussed, or you'll see in that packet, is a cap on the number per individual in Juneau. Do you have a short comment of whether you oppose that?
I mean, I definitely oppose that, just because I don't think that we should be limiting the number of professionals who can come and serve our community.
Follow up, Ms. Euskandis?
No, I don't think so. You understand it's a cap on the individual, not a cap on the number within Juneau.
I'm sorry, can you clarify?
I just want to make sure you understand the concept. So it's not a cap on the number in Juneau. So it wouldn't be a cap like there can only be 500 or something like
Okay.
that. It would be that I, Alicia, can only have X number and Wade can only have X number. Does that
Does
change
that-
your opinion or not? And if it doesn't, that's fine.
Does that determine people who are managing on behalf of others?
We haven't dug deeply into that. So, but
I'm,
if you don't
I'm
have,
opposed to all
That's fine.
short-term rental regulation.
that's fine. Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Collins?
Yeah, I was just curious, out of the professionals, the working professionals that are coming to stay, what's the average amount of time that they're staying? 1 week, 3 weeks?
It's usually under the 30 days. So midterm rental regulations wouldn't really make any sense. We have construction workers, we've several of those. We've had medical professionals, we've had military, and usually they need something that is just temporary enough that it makes hotel living very uncomfortable.
Additional questions? Seeing none, Ms. Danhart, thank you so much for coming to testimony. Next up, we have John George. On deck is Bob Fortune. Bob, is that for John? Sir, if you just let us know what part of town, and you have 2 minutes, and you may begin.
Hey, I'm John George. I live on Fritz Cove Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for the opportunity to finally testify. Been coming to a lot of these hearings and listening to all that, and you know, your charge is to find a solution to housing in Juneau, and I don't think long-term or short-term rentals are really something that you can make a difference with, but you have made a difference on getting reporting, collecting tax, identify the difference between owner-occupied and non-owner occupied. I think that's a different, important distinction. You've heard different testimony from City of Wasilla and others who tried to regulate and found out it didn't work very well. But let me just ask a question. If you were coming to Juneau for 2 weeks with your 4 children, would you want to stay at the Baranoff? Would you want to stay in a tent? Would you want to spend time in a short-term rental? I think it's important that we provide that kind of service so that they can have a fire pit and a barbecue and a yard and places, you know, for a family, as opposed to a room in a very sterile, outdated room in a hotel. I also noticed in preparing this that there's a real difference between a short-term rental under 30 days and really a short-term rental for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It's not a year-round kind of thing, but somebody that a traveling nurse or someone in construction that comes in, and so you're not providing a year-round residence for someone. It's a long-term, short-term rental, if you will. And I think that the city needs to address things like encouraging building new houses, put in streets and sewer and water and in a subdivision, and then have an LID to pay for that over time, as opposed to a contractor that has to come up with $5 million in order to subdivide and build 12 houses.
Mr. George, that is your 2 minutes. You can give one last summarizing sentence, and we'll see if we have questions.
Okay. Well, I think there's some creative things that the city could do. I think that's beyond the scope of this group, but I would encourage you to encourage the city to look at other alternatives.
Thank you, Mr. George. Questions from the committee? Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you for being here, Mr. George, and for your testimony. I believe you said at the beginning that you operate short-term rentals, but apologies if I misunderstood that. If you do, could you let me know how many?
Okay, I have a owner-occupied short-term rental.
Great, thank you. Perfect.
Additional questions? Seeing none, Mr. George, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Bob, forgive me, could you say your last name for us? Horshover. All right. Mr. Horshover, you have 2 minutes. If you could let us know what part of town you live in, and you may begin when ready.
Yes, my name is Bob Horshover, as I mentioned. I live out at Lena Cove, and I have one very new to this short-term rental game, one short-term rental, one long-term rental, and traditionally for the last 30 years, those have been long-term rentals, so I've just changed one over. The biggest concern I have going through this new course, if you will, is the flexibility on our property that allows us to have family and friends come up in between, especially off-season times, whereas with a long-term rental, we didn't have access to the property. Now we do. It's just given us a lot of flexibility that we didn't have before. And by doing that, we've also created a revenue stream for the city. Last year, I know at least $1,500 went to the city in the form of taxes. So the idea of regulating and capping for something that I don't think we really understand completely. The Ironman study that talked about how many people we're hearing how much they spent every day. Seems like it's a very big plus for the town. And we've also had people that come in and done business meetings where there's a dozen people. We have enough parking that a dozen cars were in our driveway. So a lot of flexibility for people that may not be quite a conference like in a big hotel setting, but small enough where they still need to get the work done. We're able to provide that. And if this gets really complicated, the simple answer for me is to go back to long-term rentals and just, go back to how it used to be. I think there are some options with some, looking at a more detailed impact. The numbers that I've seen are very low. Nationally, we're less than half of what the percentage is for some of the bigger metropolitan cities.
Mr. Hartover, that brings us to our 2-minute time period. If you have a sentence to finish up your testimony, and we'll go to questions.
Yeah, I would just encourage the city to identify what it is they're trying to do and understand that the pluses of what short-term rentals, to what I've seen, has been positive far more than it is negative. And before we start trying to corral something that we don't even know where it's going, I think we need more information, and I would encourage the city to give about a 3-year moratorium of any regulation about capping or anything until they have good intel.
All right, thank you very much for that. Do we have questions from the committee for Mr. Hartover? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony this evening, sir, or this afternoon.
Thank you.
Now up, Catherine Reardon, followed by Kelly Dindinger. And Ms. Reardon, if you'd introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes, and you may begin when ready.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Reardon. I live in and own my home basically across from the governor's mansion on Calhoun Avenue. I mention this because it's an ideal location for short-term rental. And the interior layout of my house is such that it operates as a duplex or a single-family house. I have rented the downstairs apartment or upstairs 2-bedroom apartment, depending on my needs, for probably 20 of the past 30 years as long-term rentals, either seasonal, 3-4 months, or year-round. And prior to that, between the ages of 23 and 30, I was someone who looked for furnished, short 3-month, 4-month housing every year until I was in a position where I had a year-round job. So with that perspective, I would say, contrary to my neighbors, that I believe it's very important to get ahead of this and regulate and limit short-term rentals before a lot of my neighbors make financial investments that are dependent upon continuation of short-term rentals. That's why I don't think we should wait to see what's going on for too many years to regulate, because at that point people will be stuck. They've made investments assuming they're going to make short-term rental type of returns. And so I appreciate your work thinking about this now. My main reason for wanting to limit the expansion of short-term rentals is because of the economic needs of our community. I see the Assembly focusing a lot appropriately on workforce housing, the need for workforce housing, and the need for housing for folks in their 20s. Is that my time?
Ms. Reardon, that is your time.
That
You
is
can
my
finish
time.
up.
Can I do one sentence?
Yep.
Okay. I have all kinds of ideas on this. I guess, I think that short-term rentals, despite the fact that I enjoy them myself, I think they're a good service. I don't think there's anything dangerous or destructive about the people who are availing themselves of it. But I think we need to focus as a community on our workforce housing, and it runs contrary to that. If I send in written comments, like
We will get them, yes, ma'am.
you'll see them as long as I get them in by Monday.
Correct, Mr. Barr. We're still taking written testimony. All right. Questions from the committee for Ms. Reardon? Seeing none, Ms. Reardon, thank you for coming and testifying today. Next up, Kelly Dendinger, followed by Brenda Heibinger. Ms. Dendinger, if you let us know what part of town you live in, you have 2 minutes and you may begin when ready.
I'm Kelly Dindinger, and I live in Ock Bay. Forgot my glasses, but I'll do my best. I have to ad lib. Okay, is it my time or what?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, I'm a property manager, and I'm also an owner of a tour company. I oppose to these short-term rental regulations. It would be detrimental to businesses like mine that depend on the flexibility of housing to meet seasonal staffing needs. It's irresponsible for the task force to not consider the real dynamics of Juneau's uniquely seasonal economy and housing needs. None of these initiatives are going to result in more affordable housing. Short-term rentals aren't a luxury or an extra, they're a necessity. They help absorb seasonal surges in demand and provide the needed flexibility in our housing stock. In years when I wasn't able to find enough housing for my employees, I had to purchase properties so that I could continue to run my business. Now, the properties, I keep them available for the employees, but I also use them as short-term rentals so to keep them viable. If these regulations render the property unrentable, then they're going to sit vacant. Okay. If workers can't find housing, they won't come. This means employers like me will have to continue to step up and provide it. If housing costs rise to the point that tour prices exceed what the market will bear, then we're going to have to ratchet back, and the market will balance itself out. That's how supply and demand works. The regulations send the wrong message. They penalize responsible owners who are trying to fill the housing gap and solve a real problem. We don't need excessive regulations to fix the housing market. What we need is to be more flexible. One more sentence.
One more sentence, Ms.
Okay.
Dendinger.
Let the market work itself out. That's what drives the innovation, entrepreneurship, and long-term sustainability, not regulations that pick winners and losers.
Thank you, Ms. Dendinger. Questions from the committee? Ms. Euskandis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. I lost it in the beginning. How many short-term rentals do you operate?
Well, I'm a property manager, and so I have clients that I manage their properties for, and I have rentals that I own and manage, so I have a lot. I have quite a few. So.
Do you have a gross magnitude of order? More than 10, less than 10?
Is that going to help you with any kind of?
It helps give context. Yeah.
I don't really want to.
If you don't want to disclose, that's fine. Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Collins?
Yeah, you mentioned that you had purchased your short-term rentals originally for housing needs.
For my employees.
For your employees. So
In the
that's
summertime.
seasonal housing.
Yes.
So you're using them, you say, in the winter only for short-term rental?
Well, so I use them all year round, but so if I have a shortage in housing for my staff, or when I have staff that's coming in for a new job and I'm still and I keep trying to find housing, so I'll put them in my units, and then if my units are available and they're vacant while I'm waiting for that next employee to come in, then I'll use it as a short-term rental. But definitely in the wintertime, they're all short-term rentals. They're, but it's traveling nurses, it's professionals coming, it's people coming from the rural communities for medical appointments or for shopping or staying for the holidays with their family or whatever during the wintertime. Legislative, most of my stuff is in the valley, so I don't have a lot of actual legislative staff. But, the demand for other people that need housing, because downtown is full of legislative staff. And so everyone else doesn't have a place to stay when they come in for these other types of things they need our community for. And these can be like a week, or it could be 3 months, type of thing.
Additional questions? Mr. Coleman?
Thanks for your testimony. If there was a cap put in place, how would it impact your employees, and what would happen to your short-term rentals? What would you anticipate?
Ms.
Well,
Dendinger?
it depends on, what the cap is, but
It would definitely cause us to not be able to provide seasonal housing for our work staff. And I mean, I think it would result in a legal thing because that would put us out of business. We've been in business for 40 years, you know? So I think there'd be a real problem.
Additional questions? Seeing none, Ms. Dindinger, oh, sorry, Ms. Shivens, I didn't see you all the way down there.
So just a clarification, before short-term rentals were a thing, you would, for your workers, you would buy up properties, house your employees in the summer, and then those buildings were left sort of vacant in the winter periods.
Well, we would largely vacant, but we would rent them here and there for people who are coming through the legislative session. You know, that isn't perfect for us, so it's good that the stuff is in the valley in the session, because that goes through May 15th, and we need it like April 1st, you know? So I wasn't renting really to legislative staff, but other people would come in for longer periods of time and might need a temporary rental that could be just in that off-season period. And so if we found somebody like that needed that, then we would try to rent it out, of course, you know. But otherwise, but it had to be available for the employees.
All right. Ms. Dindinger, thank you very much for coming and providing your testimony. Ms. Dindinger, it looked like you had there's another Kelly Dindinger down with a different address. Could you maybe sign the thing twice? Okay. Next up, we have Brenda Heiminger on deck, Colin Cornerton. Ms. Heiminger, if you just introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're in, and you may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Renda Heimbigner. I live downtown Juneau, and I rent both long-term and short-term to legislators, vacation renters, and professionals. I'd like to begin my comments by reminding the task force of the housing need and residential financial feasibility findings ordered by CBJ and released in July 2024. The study reports that meeting future demand for available housing requires new construction, not suppression or regulation of existing units. It recognizes changing demographics for people living in their home longer, more singles occupying their homes, retirees and widows not downsizing, and the report recommends tracts of land owned by CBJ to be put out to market to specifically address the need for available housing. You've also seen data that recognizes short-term rentals have not increased since 2020. I can tell you that short-term rentals are incredibly labor-intensive for landlords. It is a personal choice for us to scrub toilets, change beds, and keep up with necessary maintenance for people that, are just coming through. Burdening these homeowners with unnecessary permitting and regulations to keep up on will not increase available housing, nor address lower-income housing. The answer is new construction. In parting, I will call your attention to lodging tax records 2024 from 2023. You'll notice a downturn in vacation rental income and the need to encourage short-term rentals to meet the needs of independent travelers. COVID has discouraged many from lodging in hotels where they share space with large number of persons. COVID has taught us that lesson, and short-term rentals offer a haven with less exposure to medical issues, thus creating a demand for them, which benefits the community. I would also recommend you of WSILA's loosening of regulations, and I spoke with the Haines Economic Development Council last week, who explained that Haines is reversing all of their ordinances regarding short-term rentals to encourage their number.
Ms. Heiminger, that concludes your time. Will you take it to the committee? Questions from the committee from Ms. Heiminger. Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Ms. Heimbigner. Would you give me a sense of how many short-term rentals you operate?
I rent my primary home as a bed and breakfast, and I have one additional short-term rental.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Dordea.
Yeah, do you have any more information from the conversation with the Visitors Bureau and Haines as to what they're doing and what the rationale behind it is?
I do. They are extremely sensitive to the economic benefit of short-term rentals, and their objective is to increase them. They are loosening all of anything that restricts the number of short-term rentals. They have no caps, and they are on the road to encourage tourism and short-term rental they see to be viable, because those are independent travelers. They spend more time in the community, which gives them more time to spend money dining, doing excursions. And so those are a very valuable commodity that they have recognized. And yeah, and I just hope that the task force takes note of that.
Thank you. Additional questions for Ms. Heimbigner? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony today. Now up, Colin Connerton, on deck, Marta Chaucy. Hope I said that right. Mr. Connerton, if you just introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're in, and you may begin. You have 2 minutes.
Sure. My name's Colin Connerton. I'm a pet-friendly landlord. I'm a regular landlord, and I'm a short-term operator as well. So I've kind of come at this from all angles. I've seen it all. I deal with, the Juneau rental housing page day by day, and I'll kind of start from here. So you've all been given a task. First of all, let me thank you all for your time. You guys have dedicated a ton of your own personal time on this. This is not an easy topic, and I want to extend my thanks to you all for putting your brains together and trying to come up with some sort of solution. You've all been given a task based on a false premise that STRs are a major contributor of Juneau's lack of affordable housing and housing in general. The premise goes against all the available data as presented by your task force member, Ms. Scheibitz. This data shows limiting the number of STRs will not lead to a discernible impact on affordable long-term housing, while negatively impacting Juneau's economy and taking away viable housing options for independent travelers who bring a lot of money into this community. In addition, many of these homes that are non-owner operated that would be at risk of severe regulation that you guys have discussed are homes that are never going to make it to the rental market that we're trying to target. I know this because I'm out there in the real world. I see the tenant applications. I know what they're trying to pay, what the goals are, and these 4-bed, 3-baths on Mountainside, on Blueberry Hill, on Fritz, they're not in that segment. So we're going to be taking away from the Juneau economy and not solving the solution that we need to be. But I do agree, we need solutions for long-term affordable housing. Long-term is important here because you have to define that correctly. Right now, you're focused on 30 days. The problem is most of the Juneau renters that are coming to Alicia, to Greg, to Wade, and to some of you probably are looking for 12-month rentals. And most of them want pet-friendly rentals. The problem with that is as a pet-friendly owner, and I'm running out of time, I could go on and on. So we have some issues.
Go ahead and summarize.
Okay,
Mr.
I'll wrap
Connerton.
up. I'll wrap up. Okay. I implore the committee to look at it a little bit differently and to work on it from a perspective of using this beautiful community that we have, this ability to house these independent travelers, these medical professionals, these construction workers, and turn that into an economic engine that can then produce the solutions through a city fund to solve the actual problem, the segment of the population that you want to impact. You are going to miss it if you go this one direction that you seem to be wanting to go, or at least the majority of you. You're going to be able to hit it if you actually take money from the operators like ourselves, charge significant fees. That's okay. We're all here to solve this problem. No one's blind to the fact that the affordable housing in Juneau is
Mr. Connerton, thank you for that. I'm going to bring it back to the committee. Questions from the committee? Ms. Uskandis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here and thank you for your testimony. I think you made some friends in the audience with the significant fees.
I only want to be your friend, Alicia.
Great. I love that you're pet friendly. So you're long-term, you rent long-term rent, you're year-round, can I say, year-round rentals, pet-friendly rentals. Did you say you have one short-term rental?
No. So I manage my father's, which helps pays for his hospital care. And then I have 3 right now, or two going on 3, non-owner occupied. I have vast majority are long-term housing, so that's kind of where and a funny story, just so you guys, and I think this is important context so you understand. I didn't get into the STRs because I thought that it was necessarily something that I wanted to do. I do now enjoy it and hosting people and showing Juno. But what happened was I had a tenant who had a cat urine situation. It had to be a complete gut. $250,000 later, I had to come up with a creative solution to help pay for that. So that becomes this whole, like, as the new wave of landlords come into Juno and replace kind of the older generation, we're running into these problems of affordability. How do you tackle that and balance it? My thought was, hey, if I can run my long-term rentals because I do love this community, that's great. If I can have some that can help me afford to continue to operate here as a long-term landlord, that's kind of a mix and a match. Is there a perfect percentage? I think that's a really hard number, but I think that you guys have an opportunity to really impact in a positive way and establish significant money, millions and millions of dollars every year funneled to addressing this housing and solving the big picture, rather than to say, hey, take these 125 homes off the market, let's see what happens. Let's hope versus let's do. And you guys seem to want to go the hope route. And I really
Thank you
go to
so much.
All right, yes,
I
thank you,
got that
Mr.
answer.
Conner. Thank you, Mr. Connerton. Do we have Marta Chaucy? Is that right? All right. So ma'am, if you would just introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hi, my name is Marta. Chaussee is French. It's a hard one when you look at it. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm in opposition to any kind of restrictions on short-term rentals. I live in Douglas, and I currently own 4 long-term rentals and 3 short-term rentals, although 2 are up and 1 is in the state of becoming. Short-term rentals are not the right housing stock to solve Juneau's housing crisis. Juneau's housing needs are specific, affordable units under $2,000 a month, according to the CBJ Northwest Douglas Plan of 2024. Many short-term rental properties are high-end homes, seasonal cabins, or unique locations. They are not suitable or affordable for year-round, low-income residents. Converting short-term rentals into long-term rentals would not solve the affordability problem. It's the wrong property for the job. Also, restricting short-term rentals probably would not create the housing we need. The tax revenue can directly support programs from tax revenues from short-term rentals can directly support programs that build or subsidize low-income housing. I would request that we create solutions that support both short-term rentals and affordable housing instead of an either-or approach.
Thank you very much for that testimony. We had 15 seconds to spare. Questions from the committee? Ms. Chaussee, thank you for coming and providing your testimony today. That concludes the written list. Are there any members of the audience that would like to provide public testimony at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to close public testimony, Mr. Barr. We did not have anything else on our agenda. We're listening to public testimony today during the session, and I'm hoping as many of you as possible can come join us tonight from 5:30 to 6:30. We'll give members of the public a second opportunity to provide public testimony. Mr. Barr, is there anything else that we need to address during this meeting today?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any comments or questions for the good of the order? Seeing none, this STR committee is adjourned. Thank you.